Good day and welcome to another edition of Citizens Movement Radio News. Today is Monday, the 2nd of June 2025. I'm Bernard Chele, ready to bring you the latest news and updates. Here are today's headlines on Citizens Movement Radio News. Siziba speaks on the way forward in opposition. President Chamisa hailed for standing with ordinary citizens. Women bear brunt of human-wildlife conflict, says MP. Now let's delve into the detailed stories. Activist, human rights defender and advocate Chamisa's top ally, Gift Ostalo Siziba, has addressed the state of opposition politics and the path forward in removing the corruption-riddled ZANU-PF government led by Emmerson Mnangagwa. In a wide-ranging interview with HSTV's Trevor Ncube, Siziba emphasized the urgent need for change in Zimbabwe. Let's hear part of the interview.
While remaining focused on the task at hand in transforming the country for change, what in your view have been the biggest victories so far that you have scored?
I think that our biggest victory is to allow young people to participate in the politics of our country. When President Tsvangirai passed away, may he so rest in power, we were some of the people who were very publicly supporting the emergency of a generation of younger people, so that we motivate our colleagues in universities to understand that the fight has to go beyond bones and soup in colleges to the political questions of the day. So I think that our biggest victory was to allow young people to see the need for them to contribute in the politics. Fundamentally in 2018 and up to 2023, I think young people began to be interested in the politics of our country. The 2023 outcome showed that the coming in of younger people in parliament, in local government, I think to some extent we contributed to that, interest in young people to participate, because most people think that politics is dirty, it's for older people. So that intergenerational mix, that how do we harvest from your wisdom and knowledge in the trenches, Trevor, into the next generation. So instead of being two separate generations, how do we bring intergenerational conversation so that we take from what we have done as a generation and advance it forward and correct what has not been done correctly? So for me, I think that has been the biggest victory in terms of our conduct.
Because you've said a number of things which I think are fundamentally important. The transition process, getting people that understand this, transfer of power. You're talking about convergence. You're talking about the progressive democratic forces coming together. What does that look like to you? Some of us are pushing for the NTA, which is a very ambitious project, National Transitional Authority. Because also again to a point that you've mentioned, I believe, and push back as much as you may, I don't believe that right now we do have a single political party or a single political player that can get us out of this. I want to go to your point about, let's restore the agency to each one of us, each one of our organizations, and say, we all need to come together to have a conversation about how broken we are and how we move ourselves from this. And some of us are positing that perhaps the best idea is an NTA. It might work. Maybe some people with bright ideas out there. What do you say to that? What's your pushback on that?
I think that the idea of an NTA, we once, when we were in the CCC after the election, we proposed that there is a problem with the election. The election has been manipulated. And we knew that the lack of legitimacy to those that are forcibly taking power, President Chamisa had won the election, but the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, against every credible observer mission in the country, decided to announce the winner. We argued that this gives birth to the genesis of another vicious crisis in our country. But there's no political legitimacy. The people that have been voted for are not there. And then that crisis translates into performance legitimacy, the economy, social service, and the challenges we face today. And so we propose that there must be a transitional mechanism to take us back into a credible election. And we proposed it and we put it out there because we felt that Zimbabwe has to be rescued back into a process that will give those who govern a mandate. So there are fault lines, with great respect to the proposition about the NTA, in my own, and these are my personal view as a student. I think that the first fault line is that I think we should not put the cart before the horse. Even if we know that this is destination, process legitimacy is important. How do we get to that defined legitimacy? Because the intentions are the same. The intention is to rescue our country. So how do we bring, like I've identified, the progressive forces, the collective of our country into the table?
I want to press you there. Answer that question. How do we do it?
I think
you're 100% right. Process is important. But how do we do it?
I think let's take lesson from the National People's Convention of 99. I think people ought to look at what defines the social forces now. Who are these people? Where are the vendors?
Interesting. Let's go back to the big question, the transition, the process. How do you see? Because for me, I must put my cards on the table here and say, repeat what I've said, which is, I do not see an election under the current circumstances resolving this. There are entrenched interests that will not allow a free and fair election. Let's not fool ourselves. And the rules have been rigged already. Point number one. Point number two, the opposition is in a mess. ZANU-PF is corrupt. It's rotten. We are broken. You've said that, and I've said that. We are broken as a society. How do we fix this collective brokenness? The people in the ruling party who want this thing to continue are people that are eating right now, who are getting the contracts, who are close to the president and his family and everything else. There's opposition within ZANU-PF to ZANU-PF.
Yeah.
But you and I must be interested in, how do we, for your children, do you have children now?
No.
Okay. For your children and my grandchildren, what country are they going to inherit? And I believe, if you love this country, that's what we ought to be invested in. How do you solve that issue?
I think, like it's
focusing on the process.
I think that the first thing, let's take lesson from the 1990 convention, because it was the process that matters for me as I read it. So I think that the first thing is to identify the social forces in the country. Where are the people? Are they in the informal sector? Are they in the profession? Are they in universities? Are they in embassies? Are they in the civic society? Where are the people? That is the question. Sure. Let's locate where the citizens are. Once we locate where the citizens are, we then begin a process of convergence, which is what we propose when we're in the democratic alternative, that we must then foster a process of convergence of these key social and political forces, so that one...
So how does this convergence look like?
So in black and white...
Describe it. What does it look like?
In black and white, I think that...
a conference?
It can be a setup like a conference, probably convened, for example, maybe by the church, or convened by the progressive, labor movements. It has been fractured now, but, there must be those who convene the conversation for Zimbabwean. So, because we don't have to start on the end result. Let's start on the conversation. So that you define the problem, we define the problem, they define the problem, then we see that, okay, these are points of convergence. When we locate that is what we call the national question. We'll get to agree on the national question. When we agree, we then agree on the program of action that will lead us. We agree that, and we propose at the democratic opposition that, look, we have to take our country back to legitimacy. That is into a free and fair election. But like you say, under the circumstances, it is difficult and outright impossible. So to do that, we then propose that the mechanism that must be there is a mechanism that will allow Zimbabweans to talk, Zimbabwe to look back, and Zimbabwe to look into the future. Once we look into the future, we're able to say, this is the common destiny. That becomes the vision for Zimbabwe. Right now, We don't know where we are going. A few would know where we are coming from, but majority have no idea.
How long do you see this process happening? Because we are in 2025. Constitutionally there should be an election in 2028. Do you see this process happening before then? If that doesn't happen, you and I know that those that want to grab and run with this thing in 2028 or 2030 will do that. And then we're waiting for another cycle. How long do you see this process take?
I personally don't think it must be pivoted in the electoral cycle for obvious reasons. I also believe that it must be centered on what the genesis of the problem. In our movement, we philosophize the problem as the problem of the unresolved question of 2023. That's where we start. But others have to bring where they start in terms of the genesis of the problem. In that way, we'll be able to, I wouldn't know, for example, the hypothetical time frames, but I know that once we find ourselves in that platform and space, some of us will be happy because it doesn't matter how long it is going to take.
Yeah.
Nelson Mandela stayed in prison for 21 years. So I don't think that it will matter when we'll get there, but it will give some of us comfort that we are now in the genesis of resolving the political question. Because right now, Mkoma Trevor, our country faces a crisis of uncertainty. And as a political scientist, I can tell you that once there is uncertainty, you face an imminent danger. That's where military interventions come in and unsustainable
That's
processes.
where the desperation, and this is going to be the last question. There's so much I want to talk about. You and I could talk on forever. The Gaza conundrum that we face. We have this man called Blessed Gaza that nobody's heard about, that suddenly excites the nation, and there's a shutdown that's forever. You have a man called Chabang that nobody's heard about. I will say in your chair and comes and grabs this thing, and some people, could these things be avoidable? Are we that desperate?
I think that Gaza is, my personal view is that he is an expression of the crisis of the performance legitimacy facing the country. He is now expressing what all of us have been saying, that there are problems that are political in the country. And he now then represents another section that had been silent on this challenge. When I did a press conference just after the eve of the election, in fact, post the election, I did a press conference and we argued that if we don't resolve this issue, we are going to start seeing it. And we're calling for those who didn't want to participate in the conference that you're going to start seeing this. And Gaza is now expressing it in terms of how soldiers are experiencing the crisis, the security sector, the war veterans, members of ZANU-PF. So these have been the silent people when we're defining the crisis. So he's an expression of the song that some of us have been singing about the crisis in the country and the need for leadership. We have a slight difference on what should happen, right? But we have an agreement around the definition of the crisis.
Meanwhile, President Nelson Chamisa has been hailed as the voice of the voiceless who genuinely stands for the interests of ordinary citizens. This was said by opposition leader in Mashonaland Central, Sam Gondongwe, who said Advocate Chamisa has been consistent in articulating issues of ordinary citizens. He said President Chamisa will make a good president for Zimbabwe and urged citizens to support his transformation agenda. Gondongwe said,
let me take this opportunity to shout back and hail President Nelson Chamisa, who has always been the voice of the voiceless, who genuinely stands for the interests of the ordinary citizens of this nation, Zimbabwe. Advocate Nelson Chamisa has been consistent in articulating issues of ordinary citizens. You'll find him everywhere. He stands with the elderly. He feels for the elderly. He feels for the sick. He feels for the vulnerable citizens of this nation. He feels for for those guys who are touts, who are called touts. He feels for the people that are called artisanal miners. He feels for people that are not going to school. He feels for those that are sick. He feels for those that are involved in accidents while the government is quiet. He feels for this nation, you know, for the plight of this nation affects his heart so much. He is the man that can come down, right down into a village just to cry with the elderly people that will be mourning their loved ones. He is a kind of man that will disembark from his car and walk in the mud together with us, holding hands in our rural areas. This is the type of a president that we are looking for in Zimbabwe. President Chamisa, to me, will make a good president for Zimbabwe, and I urge all citizens to support his transformation agenda, because once he is at the helm, everyone is going to be happy. There will no longer be arrests for nothing. These arrests that are going on because of power retention. He is a man that will liberate the courts, even the police, the uniformed forces will be liberated, the war veterans will be liberated, the nurses, the teachers will be liberated. Every Zimbabwean, every peace-loving Zimbabwean will be liberated once President Nelson Chamisa becomes the president of this nation, because right now we have got no independence. Right now, we are under siege as a nation. Right now, we've got no freedom of speech. Right now, we've got no freedom of assembly. Once you are seen standing and gathering with other people, you are arrested for nothing. You are arrested for crimes that are cooked right there. So I truly urge citizens of this nation to support President Nelson Chamisa for the transformation agenda that he is bringing in, and this nation will be back to its feet, back to its walking, to start walking again, because right now we are almost down and out. We truly need to support President Nelson Chamisa.
Mashonaland and West Women Proportional Representation MP Honorable Mutsamrombedzi has once again reiterated calls for authorities to address increasing cases of human-wildlife conflict. Honorable Murombedzi said in marginalized communities like Kariba, it is women who are victims of animal attacks in most cases, looking for water and firewood. Her comments comes after 2 women were recently attacked by crocodiles in rural Kariba. Let's hear Honorable Murombedzi speaking.
Indeed, what is happening in Kariba is heartbreaking. Kariba Nyami, rural Kariba is heartbreaking, but sadly something that is not new. In most of our rural communities, it is women who bear the brunt of human-wildlife conflict. And in this case, we've got 3 women who were attacked by crocodiles in a space of days, within a week actually. And 2 women in Mola, 1 in Negande, and sadly we are missing 2 women from the 3 who were attacked. 1 from Negande is missing, 1 from Mola is missing, and 1 miraculously survived the crocodile attack. And women are the ones who are out fetching water. Or most of the time, they're the ones who are out fetching firewood or trying to feed their families. And so they encounter human-wildlife conflict more than the other gender. And when crocodile attacks happen, it is not just a tragedy. It is a reflection of deep systemic failure. And these are not isolated incidents. They speak to the lack of investment in rural infrastructure, in proper water infrastructure. If you want to look at it, these women, these people from these areas, they share water sources with wild animals. They have no choice but go to the river to fetch water for their families. They have no choice but go to the river to fish and fend for their families. And in real, this speaks to the lack of gender responsive policies. We have raised this in Parliament and will continue to do so. And will call on the relevant ministries and departments not to turn a blind eye. Our rural women are bleeding, and this must be treated as an urgent national crisis. Our women are bearing the full brunt of human-wildlife conflict. Our women are carrying the wounds of human-wildlife conflict.
Harare West Member of Parliament Honorable Joanna Mamombe has said there is need for a new legislation banning certain breeds of dogs. Her comments comes after a 39-year-old Samuel Machara was mauled to death by a pit bull dog in New Bluffville. The owner of the dog, Mike Mpinga, has since been arrested and charged with culpable homicide. The killer dog, along with other dogs at the property, were all put down by the SPCA. Citizens President Advocate Nelson Chamisa has raised the concern over the crisis in the education sector that has since more than 49,000 learners dropping out of school last year. President Chamisa promised to revamp the education sector when he forms the next government. He also said the government must allocate 20% of the national budget towards education in line with the Dakar Declaration. President Chamisa also took a swipe on ZANU-PF government for creating idols out of corruption instead of education. We spoke to some of President Chamisa's top supporters to give us their views on the matter.
I am Lentor Manaka, an ex-political prisoner. I do agree with our President Nelson Chamisa's thoughts he shared on his social media platforms, stating that the education system in our country demands urgent attention. His observation shows he is a true leader who has his people at heart. Education is a child's fundamental right. Unfortunately, the current merciless, cruel, dictatorial, and bloodthirsty regime prioritizes corruption and looting. It is so sad to learn that latest statistics show a shockingly high number of 49,555 school dropouts in 2024. Education is indeed a fundamental right of every child, as recognized by the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 26, and the Convention of Rights of the Child. Education is essential for the development of individuals, communities, and societies as a whole. The failed regime of Mnangagwa is not concerned about education as a fundamental right of every child. That's why the regime is always in foolhardy behavior. My message to our President Nelson Chamisa is, I beg you to come back to politics full time and rescue the nation. Unemployment, education, health, economy, and human rights. Thank you.
Hello, Zimbabwe, hello, citizens. Tony Shava here. Yeah, concerning what President Nelson Chamisa has said, it is quite alarming. It's quite an alarming figure that we are seeing there. About 49,000 learners having dropped out of school. In the 21st century, in a country that has won its independence many years ago. But we see that we are still having a problem whereby children are dropping out of school instead of the government taking care of the kids who are not able. In other countries, we see that education is actually free. And the most frustrating thing is the fact that the Mnangagwa government has promised us free education many times, and it always comes just before the elections. But after the election, it's dead and buried, and nobody gets to talk about it. So it's quite very unfortunate. We believe that if President Nelson Chamisa comes into power, he is capable of doing that because other countries have done it. So why not Zimbabwe? We can do it. It will quite help a lot if that 20% of the national budget is given towards those underprivileged children. In fact, all primary education and even secondary education, they must go for free because it's something that is, education is a right of every human being, every child. Every child must have an opportunity to learn. So what we need is a sober-minded government system that can see beyond. Because what we see that
the government that is there in power right now in Zimbabwe, they have run down the education system, they have run down the health system. Everything has been run down. We need something new. We need a new system. We need a new president. Thank you.
Award-winning journalist Wopo Chingono has warned that the newly launched media policy by ZANU-PF dictator Emmerson Mnangagwa is meant to stifle the media as opposed to uplifting it. Chingono said the media policy will increase surveillance on media houses and digital online content creators. He said the ZANU-PF government will hide behind national interest and patriotism to deter journalists from reporting against corruption. Masvingo opposition youth leader Kelvin Tinaro has voiced his frustrations at the continued postponement of his trial because of the state's failure to present witnesses. Tinaro, who is facing trumped-up charges of incitement of public violence, appeared in court on Friday, but this case was yet again postponed to 27 June 2025. He said he has no case to answer before the courts, but is being persecuted for his political beliefs. Tinaro said.
Right, I thank you, journalists. It's true, last Friday we were at Masvingo Major Street Court and we spent almost 9 hours from 8 to 4 o'clock only to have the proceedings postponed once again to 27 June. The reason, the court claimed that they are waiting for proof from the state. Unfortunately, they failed to provide it. And this is the fifth court appearance, and it's disheartening to see the lack of evidence supporting their claims. And as the youth of Zimbabwe, we don't tolerate this unjust system. We want democracy in Zimbabwe. I'm concerned about the repeating postponements and the state's inability to present their case. I hope that justice will be served on June 27. I thank you.
A ZRP police officer in Rua, Prince Ndadambi, assaulted to death a 39-year-old citizen named as Blessed Believe Juruvenge in custody. Reports are that Juruvenge died from wounds sustained from torture by the rogue police officer. This is not the first time citizens have died at the hands of the police due to brutal torture in custody. In 2019, a vendor in Harare, Hilton Tafadzwa Tamangani, died in state custody after succumbing to injuries from police torture. The late popular opposition activist Aida Hanyani, popularly known as Gogo Chiera, was remembered by scores of opposition supporters who gathered for her memorial at her Glenview home on Saturday. Gogo Chiera is famous for openly declaring her vote for Advocate Nelson Chamisa during the 2023 general elections. Senior opposition officials, headlined by citizens organizer Honorable Amos Chibaya, converged in Glenview over the weekend for her memorial. Let's take a look at our sports news. In the Kasolaga Premier Soccer League, leaders Moors edged Scotland 1-0 at Ngoni Stadium in Norton on Saturday to extend their lead at the top. Fading Giants Dynamos remained in relegation zone after playing a 0-0 draw against Highlanders yesterday. Here are the results of matches played over the weekend. Rentals 0, Bigita Minerals 2. Manica Diamonds 0, Capes United 1. Kariba 1, Yada 0. Kwego United 1, Greenfield 1. Teo 1-0, Platinum FC 1. Simba Bora 0, Ngezi Platinum 0. And Chicken Inn 0, Triangle 0. Paris Saint-Germain were crowned European champions for the first time in their history after walloping Italian side Inter Milan 5-0 in Munich, Germany on Saturday night. In CAF Champions League, Egyptian side Pyramids were also crowned champions after beating Mamelodi Sundowns of South Africa 2-1 last night in Cairo. To conclude our Citizens Movement Radio News, here are the headlines once more. Siziba speaks on the way forward in opposition. President Chamisa hailed for standing with ordinary citizens. Women bear the brunt of human-wildlife conflict, says MP. The news on CMR English. I'm Bernard Stele. Me and the other news team wishes you all a good evening. Good night.
Bye.